بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وزدنا علما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد الفاتح وأغلق والخاتم ما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله وصحبه وقدره ومقداره العظيم. الحمد لله. Continuing on in this book, we're on the top of page 30. For people who are following, just at the beginning of page 30. So the last lesson we spoke about our private conversations, our intimate discourses, and how they reveal about our states and about our situations within life. So we mentioned this, and then we also, of course, spoke about the importance of the tongue and the kind of topics that we talked about. So today, now we're moving on. So you mentioned the top of page 30. رضي الله عنه ونفعنا به. الحق تبارك وتعالى بمشيئته اختار أن يقذف في قلوبكم التصديق بهذه الرسالة. So this is really a powerful declarative statement. He's saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, exalted and blessed be He, out of His choice, has chosen to cast into your hearts certainty or belief in His message. This, mashallah, is really a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you want to understand the blessing, then we should have people around us, people who don't have that. Or we should look at, like even our own lives. Look back to the time. What kind of a life were you living when you weren't necessarily practicing, when you weren't close to Allah? Or people who have entered into Islam, look back at your life before Islam. Yeah, alhamdulillah, it's a great blessing, really, something that we can't really be grateful for. That we're in a situation now, mashallah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us faith, and he's allowed us to participate in this beautiful act of this really, mashallah, amazing act of being able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, come together for His sake, and to be able to believe in Him with absolute certainty, alhamdulillah. So he says, and that's the point here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has cast this into our hearts. We haven't done anything whatsoever to deserve this. Really, we haven't done anything whatsoever to earn the honor of being from the faithful. Because no doubt there's many people out there who are better than us in many, many ways. Yeah, in terms of character, in terms of transactions, in terms of all these things, who haven't been given faith. So therefore, all of that comes to naught for them. It really does come to naught. Whereas ourselves, the deficient beings that we are, with all our mistakes and our shortcomings and our failures to fulfill the covenant that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent us with, our failure to represent the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam properly, all of these things, despite all of that, alhamdulillah, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this act of divine love, to still place faith within our hearts and to still place within us a connection to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this muhabba from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala necessitates a response from us. Just like He has favored us, just like He has placed love and longing just like He's placed love in our hearts, due to His love, we should also love Him. Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's great love and concern means that we are now people who have been chosen to be Muslims, who have been chosen to have faith cast into their heart. But just like that love, which is a profound and beautiful thing, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has loved us, we should also love Him. And this mahabba of Allah is really the most powerful of all human emotions. One of the problems of this age that we live in now, the age of the nafs, as it's been called by many, the age of the ego, where literally, you just have to go to any bookshop and see how many books you can find on like self-help, yeah, or on like how to overcome problems, addictions, or depression, or whatever it might be. This kind of aspect, this is really the heart. Yeah, this is really the heart of a lack of love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because people of muhabba, people who have love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this overpowers all of the emotions. This is why they say people who have got addictive problems, for example, if you have an addiction to something, the best way to overcome that addiction is to replace it with something else. And is to replace it with something else that you love. Yeah, this is the point, that if we have something that we love, like an addiction that we want to overcome, then replace it with something else that you love even more. And that will overpower that addiction. That's why love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most powerful way. Like I knew this, one of the brothers, he struggled, like at this time, he struggled to stay awake after Fajr. And it was a real challenge for him. You know, he'd been trying for many years to try to stay, because this is obviously the time of barakah. Imam Shafi radiallahu anhu famously said that if you desire dunya, then wake up early in the morning and take your share. And he said, if you desire akhirah, then wake up early in the morning and take your share. It's the same. Yeah, the same techniques or the same things that lead to success in the dunya also lead to success in the akhirah. That's why, like, you look at this, look at Stephen Covey, who wrote this book, the habits of successful people. He says the number one reason for success is having a strong sense of purpose. And what do the Muslims say? The number one reason for success is having a strong, powerful, firm intention. I mean, it's exactly the same. There's no difference between one and the other. Whether somebody wants a strong dunya, they want to be strong in the dunya, they want success in the dunya, or in the akhirah, it's the same. So the key to overcoming problems, overcoming addictions, obstacles within our life is to overpower them with love. So this brother, for example, he struggled in the mornings. He was saying, I would get up and then I would pray my Fajr and then I'd always have to go back to bed. I mean, obviously it's a struggle that we all engage in. Part of the reason why we've placed these lessons at this time is for that reason, is to assist in that process of overcoming, because sleep from now up until Ishraq is negative sleep. So if you're sleeping from now until Ishraq, if you sleep for half an hour, you actually lost half an hour of sleep. Yeah, it's actually negative sleep. So the idea is to go through to Ishraq without sleeping. And then after Ishraq, it then becomes the even time, so to speak. And obviously we have times of double sleep. As you know, before or after Dhuhr is double sleep. Anytime before the halfway point of the night is double sleep, between Isha and the halfway, etc., etc. So what he started to do was he started to listen to the Quran at that time. If he had a particular reciter that he loved. So he did something, he loved sleep, as we all love sleep. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't love sleep. But then he replaced it with a greater love, which was his love for listening to the Quran. And that's an example. Now, obviously, it depends. I want to look at what they do in Taneem with the children. They wake the children up at the Hajj time, and they'll have all their toys laid out for them. And they'll like, just play with your toys for half an hour, just to assist them and to accustom them to the idea of getting up at the Hajj. From a very young age, they do this. And then when they get to adulthood, they've been awake every single day of their life at that point, every single night of their life. So the idea of getting up is not hard. And then they replace that love that they had for playing with toys with love of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like Habib Umar, he just mentioned just at this last Mawlid, he said that those who have tasted from the cup, the cup of La ilaha illallah, they have no need or no desire or no yearning for mukhaddirat, for drugs, for musakkirat, for intoxicants, for alcohol, all of these. They have no need for any of that, because what they've tasted is far sweeter and far greater. Yeah, and what they've tasted really is profound. So those people whose hearts have become intermingled with love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Rasul in a deep way, and they're experiencing this sweetness and this reality, is far supersedes anything that they can have in the dunya. This is the essence of muhabba. And we ask Allah to allow us to not only taste that, but for it to become a permanent reality within our lives. How is it, you might ask, how is it that you read about these great awliya of the past, these great scholars and saintly figures of the past? How is it that they were able to struggle the way they struggled? How is it they were able to worship the way that they worshipped? And how is it that they were able to ascend and reach heights the way that they reached heights? No doubt whatsoever, the driving force behind that was a deep love of Allah and the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah, why do they not sleep at night? They can't sleep at night, because by sleeping at night, they're missing out on an opportunity to be intimate, to be close to their beloved, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah, how can they sleep out of deep concern and love for creation? That the concern that they have for creation means that they stand all night in prayer, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive the ummah and to relieve difficulties from all of humanity. Yeah, this is what the Prophet ﷺ did night after night, until, as we know, the famous narration, Sahih Muslim. This is Sahih Muslim, it's undeniable. This is absolutely sound, that he would stand in worship until his feet swelled. And this is why, like, this is one of the proofs that they use for this idea of ijtihad, this idea of juhad, of like struggling in order to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This struggle in order to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is from the prophetic essence. It's interesting, if you look at the Burda al-Musharraf, this magnificent poem, when it begins, what's the third chapter? Praise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What does it begin with? It begins with talking about his night prayer. Yeah, it talks about, he's saying, I have zalamtu sunnati, I have oppressed or I have wronged the sunnah of the one who stood up in night prayer all night till his feet swelled. Yeah, and then the one who tied a stone to his stomach out of hunger. That's how it begins, with praise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's as if he's saying, he's intimating, because the poet speaks in deeper ways. He doesn't express obviously. He gives subtle hints and he talks in a subtle and deep way. It's as if he's saying, the poet is saying to us that the most praiseworthy element of the Prophet ﷺ was this struggle. Yeah, was this intense worship that he underwent, because this was the essence of his goodness to us, his ihsan to us. Because as we look at the famous narration, there's different, one is from Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha, one is from Sayyidina Bilal. They both say to him the same thing. They say, why are you exerting yourself like this? You're praying to the extent that you're actually going to fall over because your feet are swelling up, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why are you doing this when Allah has forgiven your previous and your future sin? And what sin in reality? From the Tahir, from the absolutely pure one. Yeah, so he has forgiven, you don't sin anyway, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's impossible, inconceivable, unimaginable for you to sin. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has declared in his book, لِيَغْفِرَ لَكَ اللَّهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِكَ وَمَا تَأَخَّرَ. Yeah, in order that we may forgive you for that which preceded and that which comes. Yeah. So even if there was any dhanb, any type of sin, it's been forgiven. So why are you doing that? What does he say? He says, أَفَلَا أَكُونُ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Should I not then be a grateful slave? Should I not? So the reason he's doing it is out of love and gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah. And the second primary reason he's doing it is for us. He's praying all night so we can be saved. He's saying, Ummati, Ummati, like the famous hadith when Sayyidina Aisha wakes up in the middle of the night and she sees that the Prophet ﷺ isn't there. So she goes out, where is he gone? And she goes and she finds him at Janatul Baqi in the graveyard. And he's praying, and all he's saying in his prayer is Ummati, Ummati. He's in sujood, Ummati, Ummati. When he's standing, Ummati, Ummati. And she says, Sayyidina Aisha says to him, she goes, have you forgotten the Quran? As if like, be in prayer, shouldn't we be reading the Quran? Have you forgotten the Quran? Yeah, and the Prophet said, Ummati, Ummati, because he's concerned in the depths of the night. The reason he was tying stones to his stomach when he could have lived like the best of kings is out of concern for us, to show us the best way and to make dua and to call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our sake. That was the reason. That was the reason he forgave when he could have taken vengeance. Because he wanted from those people to emerge guides that could guide all of humanity, including us. Yeah, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed within his heart this love and concern for creation. And inshallah, I hope that Allah places within our heart a similar concern and a similar love. So he mentioned, then he says, ثُمَّ شُعُورٌ بِوَاجِبِكُمْ نَحْوَهَا وَمَا طُبِقَتْ بِهِ أَعْنَاقُكُمْ مِنْ مَسْئُولِيَّةِ فَحْمِهَا وَالْعَمَلِ بِهَا وَتَبْلِيغِهَا وَالذَّبْ عَنْهَا. Yeah. Then he says that once you've understood that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed love in your heart for this risala. Yeah, he placed love in your heart for this message. Then after that, he placed within you a perception of his obligations. Yeah, how it's obligatory upon you, and how it's a heavy responsibility on your neck. Yeah, that this conveyance, yeah, that he says understanding, acting and conveying and clinging to this message is a heavy responsibility upon your neck. And this is the thing, I mean, how many of us now feel the responsibility? Do we really perceive and feel the responsibility of conveying this message, of acting according to this message, or is it just playing games? Is it something that, and this is unfortunate, what's the problem we have now? We live in a society of la'ab wa lahu. This is the thing, we live in a society of play and amusement. So therefore, the nature of the human being is entrainment. Like we mentioned yesterday in the Tawbah class, that the society that we live in now, this modern society, is the most controlled society in human history. This is one of our teachers in Tanim was saying his observations. Sheikh Mukhtar is a real sort of specialist in the modern world, particularly in the Western environments. He's one of those from Dar Mustafa who was really taken to that. And he said that the society that we're in is very, very, very controlled. What we eat, yeah, what we dress with, the way we walk, the way we talk, the way we speak, everything is actually very, very controlled. Yeah, we're given the things that we're gonna buy, the things we're not gonna buy. Yeah, the amount of social control is absolutely unprecedented in human history, because there's tools now like media and these types of things that allow people to strike into the homes. And the thing is, it's been so long for us anyway. I mean, many of us, we grew up from the age of 1.5, 2 years old, we've been brainwashed. Yeah, this is like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, he said once that he was in like a Q&A on TV, and somebody was talking about free will, and he said one of the ladies, she stood up, she asked a really profound question, and she said, what kind of choice, what kind of free will, yeah, what kind of choice is there for someone who from the age of 1.5 has been sat in front of has been forced or sat in front of a TV set and been completely indoctrinated and brainwashed into thinking and behaving and acting in a certain way? What kind of free will is that? Because it really made him think, about the whole concept of, what is free will? To what extent do we even have free will in the modern world? It's an important question for us to consider, because we're surrounded by this, and this is what's happened. We become accustomed to la'ab wa lahu, and you really feel it when you're in an environment where that isn't the case. Like we with the Fakir, we're in an environment where you're seeing 10-year-olds, 10, 11-year-olds, they complete the Quran every week. They recite the entire Quran every week, and it's normal for them. So when I came back here, I was like talking to my parents and other people, and they were like, oh, like it's really important to finish the Quran. And of course it is, because like, for example, my daughters, they haven't really finished the Quran. They've learned Arabic and they memorized the Quran. They haven't completed the Quran, neither, like looking through it. And my eldest is 10. So it's that's a worry within our communities, but it's a false worry. Because what's better is establish love of the Quran in the heart of the human. Establish love of the Quran. They will complete the khatam every week of their life. So don't worry about that. When's the first khatam going to happen? Focus on making the first khatam a khatam of love, a khatam of desire, of contentment, of yearning. And then they'll do khatam upon khatam upon khatam throughout their lives. What we do is we rush them through that. They've got to finish it. Give them a few whacks. Hurry up, you're not reading it right. Read it quickly. And then they never want to open the Quran up ever again after that. The Quran just gathers dust on their shelves. In Ramadan, they maybe open it out of guilt. That's the relationship we've developed for our children with the Quran, rather than the actual correct relationship. So this is kind of where we're at. This is why love is central, and we need to have this idea of clinging onto this and recognizing where we are. We're in societies that are not normal. And when you go to a normal society and you see the way things should function, that you have young people, like I'm saying, the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, that are in the mosque between Maghrib and Isha reciting a juz and a half of the Quran. Normal. They're in the middle of the night, they're reciting 3 juz of the Quran in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night, they're reciting 3 juz of Quran before they even do that tahajjud, before they even do the afkar. These are young people. And then you're meeting young men and young women there who are established. When they get to teenage years, they're established in their religion. They've learned all the obligatory sciences, and then they've learned all the ancillary sciences as well, and they're like 15, 16. I'm not saying like the bright ones, this is just normal. Then the more intelligent ones, okay, fair enough, these scholars, these specialized, you always have it. I'm talking about just your awam. The base level in Muslim countries was Surah Yasin in the morning, Waqia, Mulk, and 1 juz of Quran. That was the base level. Like your average person would read Surah Waqia, he would read Surah Mulk, he would read Surah Yasin, and he would read a juz of the Quran. Even today in Morocco, we witnessed this with our own eyes in Morocco, in Fez, in all of Morocco, they read half a juz in the morning after Fajr, they read half a juz after Maghrib, they read Yasin, they read Waqia, they read Mulk. Everyone does that. There's people that have become huffaz, they memorize the Quran through sitting in those gatherings after 20 years, just by reading and reading. So, this is what I mean. This is like a normal functioning society. So because we're so far from that, it becomes difficult. It really does become difficult for us to see what's going on out there. Yeah, because we're becoming trained to a world that's not really what life's about. Yeah, that doesn't really champion humanity in any way, shape, or form. So when you become so distant, it's like they give the example of a man who's like a wolf person. So you imagine you have like a little baby who's for some reason becomes separated from his parents, yeah, and then he's raised by wolves, or he's raised by, or they give the example, the famous story is actually of a lion, like a little lion cub. So this little lion cub becomes separated from his mother and his father, and he gets taken in by wolves who, mashallah, they look after him, they love him, you know, they raise him. And then it gets to a certain age, he's developing, gets to a certain age where he roars, you know, he gets and he roars, and then wolves like, no, stop that. So what do you mean? Because no, you can't roar. You're a wolf, you can't roar. But the lion has to roar, because that's what he is. And just as a human being is a human being, we have a soul. The soul has to be fulfilled. We have to worship, and we have to love and yearn for Allah. We have to. That's just what we are within us. And when we don't do that, that's what creates this tension and this anxiety and worry within us, because we're not fulfilling our primary divine purpose, which is to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and which is to be close to him. This is what life's about. So when you're in an environment that's so far removed from that, that's not facilitating on any level, yeah, whether it be like we mentioned about beauty yesterday in the Tawbah, talking about outer beauty, yeah, all of the great institutes of Islam, whether it's Qarwain in Fez, whether it's Al-Azhar Sharif in Egypt, whether it's the Zaytuna in Tunisia, or the Qarwain in Tunisia, any other, they were all absolutely beautiful outwardly, yeah, because that uplifts the soul. Yeah, whether it's in terms of the moral conduct of people around us, whatever it might be, the fitrah is not being promoted, and therefore it becomes difficult to imagine what life should actually be about. What is life really about? It becomes difficult to even imagine that. Okay, so he's talking about, then he says, فَهِيَ عِبَارَةٌ عَنِ الْبَيْعَةِ الَّتِي بَايَعَنَا اللَّهُ عَلَيْهَا وَالْأَحَدِ الَّذِي أَحَدْنَاهُ عَلَيْهِ فِي زَمْنِ الْقَدِيمِ. So what's he saying? He's saying this adherence to the message, that we have to be people that learn about Islam, act upon Islam, and deliver Islam to others. Yeah, and he says that these three things that we do, this is an indication to the original covenant, the covenant, the contract that we took with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before we even came into this world. The soul took a contract, and what was it? It was a primordial covenant. Yeah, it was a covenant that was taken in a world before we even came into this world. And what is it? وَإِذْ أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ. Yeah, that when your Lord took from Bani Adam, yeah, from their loins, and yeah, and from their progeny, he got them to witness against their own selves, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And what do we say? Bala shahidna. Yes, indeed you are. This covenant, this original contract that we took, is the essence of our humanity. Our teachers, they tell us that this is where human history begins. Human history begins with that, and this is also the first act of education. The first act of learning is this. So therefore, if you haven't learned this, if you haven't remembered this, then all other education becomes completely bankrupt if you haven't understood this. This is why, like, the education system, again, what's the education? The beginning of the education system is to recognize who your Lord is, and then education becomes meaningful. If you have a system that doesn't have that, then it's not fulfilling any type of purpose. If you have an education system that doesn't foster love of the Rasul, like they mentioned, Imam Malik, he said that before he'd sit with any teacher, look at this for a test. He said, before I would sit with any teacher, I'd go in one of his gatherings that he'd be teaching. And he goes, I would wait for the Prophet ﷺ to be mentioned. Because when the name Muhammad ﷺ was mentioned, I would look to see his reaction. That reaction determined whether I'm going to sit with him or not. If his reaction is one of love and desire and yearning for the Rasul, right, I'm going to take from that teacher. If his reaction is not like that, I'm not going to take from that teacher. One of our brothers, he said that, why don't we do that when we take our kids to nursery? Why don't we go to the nursery teacher and mention Muhammad and see what reaction we get? If there's no reaction, then just walk out of there. It's over. Go to your primary school. Say the name Muhammad. If there's no reaction, leave. Don't put your child in an environment and then complain afterwards when they don't have any kind of love for the Rasul. They don't have any kind of connection to the religion. Well, obviously not, because you're putting them in environments, you're putting them around people that have no love and concern. Like my wife, she was mentioning when she was out in Tanim, she was studying with teachers, and when they mentioned the Prophet ﷺ, they would shake. When they were mentioning the stories, they were reciting the stories of the Prophet ﷺ, we see that they would literally shake. You would see physical manifestations of love. Like Imam Malik, his face would change color when the Prophet ﷺ was mentioned. He was once sat in a gathering and there's a scorpion biting him. He had 70 bites on his blessed body and he didn't move out of adab, out of etiquette, because I'm saying the words of Muhammad ﷺ. How can I move? How can I break ranks? I've got to stay completely still. Yeah, and what I'm saying is this exists to this day. There's people today alive right now, men and women and young people and elders and children who shake when the Prophet ﷺ was mentioned. Their very core is moved. Their very core is moved when Muhammad ﷺ is mentioned. These are the teachers. These are the people that we sit our children in front of and we say, take from them. Learn from them. Like the famous story by Imam Malik. Imam Malik at the age of 7, his blessed mother, and his mother is the secret of Imam Malik. His mother is the one who made Imam Malik, this giant. And Imam, she said, he's wrapping, my blessed mother was wrapping the turban around my head. Yeah, as he's about to go. Then she says to him, she says, take from your teacher's adab. Take from his adab before you take from his ilm. Take from his etiquette, his refinement, his behavior before you take from his knowledge. Before you take from his knowledge. And one of Imam Malik's students, he said, I studied with Imam Malik for 20 years. He said, for 10 years, I took adab from him. And 10 years, I took knowledge. And he goes, would that he's regret, because would that I had spent 20 years taking adab from him. All I should have taken from him was adab. That's all I needed from him. Yeah, so this is very important. And this is why, like, look at what we did, like Dr. Anwar Farooq Abdullah Hafidhahullah, he says that within an age where we need a lot of adab and a little bit of ilm. I mean, this is for the laity. We have scholars, I mean, people who train to be scholars who need ilm. Yeah, so it's not to negate that, of course not. Ilm is the highest thing we can do. But just from a perspective, it's saying that we need a lot of adab and a little bit of ilm. They give an analogy, someone give an analogy of like baking like a loaf of bread, and you need a pinch of salt. If you overload it with salt, the bread's not going to taste very good. And this is what's happened now. We become imbalanced. People no longer learn adab, people no longer have adab, and then they want to approach ilm. Yeah, and they want to approach knowledge. And part of the adab is, for example, how are you with the teacher? Like one of the things that we were taught is that you should always be 5 minutes early for a class. And then the teacher, doesn't matter when, you teach might come half an hour late, man, if you come out, oh, that's got nothing to do with it. You are there half an hour before a class. You are listening attentively. Yeah, you are paying, you are sat in the right way, and you are paying the utmost attention to what's being said. This is part of the adab of being a teacher. Yeah, of being a student, afwan. Yeah, and then the teacher, of course, also has his own adab. So asking for tawfiq in this regard, it's a big sort of challenge for us to become people of adab, because we really haven't been reading environments that facilitate that. But inshallah ta'ala, we hope that situation can be turned around. Inshallah, we'll stop there. If there's any questions, inshallah ta'ala, we can take questions. Oh, sorry, yeah, you're on page 30. If there's any questions, inshallah, we can take questions.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustadh. You mentioned about getting young children for tahajjud. What's good time to start that with your children?
I mean, you know, it depends. It depends. Like with the great ones, like Habib Umar, from the age of 3, his father would actually take him with him to the masjid. And people were like, you know, he's too young, what are you doing? And he said, listen, you leave my son, he has a great affair with Allah. And, you know, so he saw those secrets within him. But we hear different stories. Like, I mean, I'm sure you guys know the story of Sahal ibn Abdullah Tustari, the great Sahal ibn Abdullah Tustari. From the age of 3, he would wake up and he would see his uncle in the mid depths of the night, and he developed a bit of a yearning, and then he gives him the famous dhikr, Allahumma ma'alahu shahidin. This is dhikr that develops muraqabah, and he begins to recite it, and he feels sweetness in his heart. So from the age of 3 onwards, he was doing that. So Allah Ta'ala, I mean, with these things is really, I mean, what we've got to ask ourselves, this is one of the things that there's an expert in child development in Tareem called Habib Tahir al-Attas, Hafidhahullah, amazing man, mashallah. He's somebody who's mastered, really mastered the Western tradition. He spent about 20 years studying like Western child development psychology. He's doing a PhD at the moment in child development. And he's also mastered the Quran. He's one of the leading reciters of the Quran in Tareem. Yeah, he's got maybe 5 or 6 Quran schools, Darul Qurans under his name. And he's also really mastered obviously the Islamic tradition. I mean, you know, he's from the Habaib, he's been studying it since he was a young age. He said that, he always says this, he said, whenever you want to do something, what's your end objective? Always think, what is my objective? Why am I doing this? What's my goal? We should think this about everything. So when we look at our children, what is our goal? As we were once in a raising children class with Sheikh Ibrahim many years ago in Nelson. And someone said that, like, these things that you're talking about, they're a bit difficult. You know, like, can you not give us something that's like, you know, more palatable, more easy for us? Because he said, you know, don't put your kids in school, get them away from technology, or it's too hard. So he said, he goes, it depends on your own himmah. He said, there's people with their very high himmah, and their children, like, for example, they just went to the lands of purity. They just went to Damascus, they just went to Tareem, they just went to Mauritania, they just went to wherever they went to. And he said that, he goes, I know children the age of 5 who see the Prophet ﷺ in a waking state. They see him in a waking state as a regular occurrence at the age of 5. So if that's your standard, if you be like, I've got a child, I want my child to be seeing Muhammad ﷺ in a waking state, that's your objective, then go and do whatever it takes. If your objective is for your child to become strong in Iman, Yaqeen, then that's whatever your objective might be for your child to be like, you know, have a bit of the dunya as well, you know. I want, you know, alhamdulillah, if you want that, you want that. I mean, personally, Faqir can't understand that, but alhamdulillah, ala kulli khal, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. You want your child to have a bit of the dunya as well. As in, what I'm saying, not the dunya, what is dunya is what that which distracts from Allah. That's to understand that. The dunya is that. So if you say, I want my child to have the dunya, it means you want them to be distracted from Allah. That's different to worldly success. Worldly success is a completely different thing. Like Imam Nawawi's famous statement about to work for money for the sake of sadaqah, that is not dunya. So if we should desire for our children the best, that they're successful in the world through da'wah, yeah, that their work, their da'wah, it also becomes a situation of money for them, and then you then use that money fi sabilillah. That's what we should desire. So whatever our optimal desire is, we look at that and then we work towards that. So, you know, that's the first thing we've got to assess. So if you want our children to become awliya, then we should be getting up for tahajjud from a very young age. If we don't desire that from them, if we desire other things for them, whatever we desire for them, then we have to adjust accordingly, inshallah. And as always, ask Allah for tawfiq.
Ustadh, I've got another question. You mentioned, you know, having love for Allah and having love for the Quran, and trying to instill this into children. What are the sort of methods of doing that, even within children and even within ourselves as well?
Excellent, mashallah. That's one of the best questions that anybody could ask. I mean, the question in and of itself shows that this is what the heart of the matter is right now. This is what it's about, and this is where we're at in the modern world now. What they say, I mean, I mentioned this in one of the first classes. One of the best ways that I've seen this personally, I mean, I wasn't physically there, but just from what was relayed to me, is through storytelling. So we had this, I'm sure you guys know about Maryam Ahmed Sinclair. She's a well-known storyteller, convert from the States, I believe. So she came a couple of times to Nelson. So she came once, she delivered a workshop on the story of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, another time on the story of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. And what happened was, you could see that this is, I mean, like I was they were saying you could see from the children like veils being removed and the love they had suddenly for the Quran. I remember speaking personally as a child, I remember reading the Quran as a young child and really struggling because I couldn't understand it. And it was taught to me quite harshly, you know, you're getting whacked and stuff like this for not reading. And then I remember when about 10 or 11, I came across a collection of books and stories of the prophets, like in English, you know, reasonably well written for my reading age at that time. So I read Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, and it really moved me. I read Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, and that was for me by far the most powerful connection that I got to the Quran through those reading these books in English. So the other thing that Sheikh Burhan, our teacher Sheikh Burhan, was obviously a primary school teacher, he mentions that, he says we should teach the Quran from the point of view of the tadabbur. So he gives an example, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدْعُو الْيَتِيمِ. These ayah, he says you take one ayah and you spend like a week or 2 weeks on that ayah. فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدْعُو الْيَتِيمِ. You look at the concept of orphans, you look at the concept of adoption, of fostering, you spend 2 weeks just on that. And then he talks about the Amul Miskeen. Then he spent 2 weeks just on talking about the importance of feeding the poor like that. He said, if you teach a child like that, when the child's 18, 25, 30, he goes to the mosque for Maghrib prayer, Isha prayer, he hears those ayat and it'll impact, he'll suddenly like, mashallah. Yeah, that will create love. So that definitely helps to instill love. Another way to instill love is beauty. Listen to beautiful recitation of the Quran and listen to them. As in listen to them with the inner eye being open and with the desire to really hear and taste the Quran, inshallah. These are some of the ways that we can do. Of course, by ourselves having love for the Quran, it will transmit onto our children naturally too. Always leading by example, inshallah. Salams. Will Inspiring Grace deliver a course on parenting in the future? I mean, the whole purpose of Inspiring Grace is parenting. So inshallah, we hope to deliver a course. But really, when we look at the issue of parenting, it's about reorientation. It really is about a reorientation. Like our whole concern should be about parenting. Like every dimension of our life, it should be about instilling within us like a desire to improve the status of our children, other people's children, yeah, and to facilitate that. So that first and foremost requires knowledge. We have to know, like we mentioned in previous class, we have to know our enemies. We have to know what's out there. And there's a lot now that our children are being bombarded with all sorts. So we have to understand that. And then we have to then act upon that. And it's difficult. Like really, what the first thing that we have to do is just decide within ourselves what are our objectives. So before someone even comes to a parenting class, he's got to know, or she's got to know, what do I want for my children? And then you can come to that class. Otherwise, you're really not going to benefit from that class, because then it might be sort of all the way up there, it might be here, it might be there. Because I remember we had one of our teachers, Sheikh Burhan, he delivered a parenting course a few years ago. And I remember there was one class where literally we probably lost about half the class. Because what he said was beautiful, but it's too hard for people. He said, and he's mashallah, he's a man of, he's really mastered logic, Sheikh Burhan. I mean, I can just tell by the way he speaks, he's really mastered logic. So he made a really profound point. For me, personally, the faqir, he spoke for about 20 minutes, and that's the most profound, really, it's the most profound most profound lesson I've had about Islam in the English language, qat, full stop. Like whatever I've heard in the last 20 odd years from English speaking scholars, that's the most profound thing that I've heard. And what did he say? He said, first and foremost, the Prophet ﷺ, he had the best upbringing of all. True or not true? Yes, it's true. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself taught him adab. He taught him adab, and what excellent adab he taught him. Yeah, he had the best upbringing of all. His perfect upbringing, and he said, what was his upbringing? His upbringing was in extreme material discomfort, extreme physical discomfort. It was a very, very, very difficult upbringing. And he goes, through the prism of that upbringing emerged beauty and perfect character. And he says, if you don't get the point, look at Sayyidina Fatima Zahra al-Batul, who was raised directly by the Afdal al-Khalq. He raised her. How did he raise her? He raised her, again, in a crucible of extreme difficulty. Yeah, extreme poverty. extreme, difficult, very, very difficult time. At the age of 6, she's having to go out and she's seeing things that are like, we would be like, that's traumatic. And she saw violence, or she saw individuals pouring the intestines of a sheep onto a blessed father's back whilst he's in sujood, and she goes and clears it, and she's shouting at them, how dare you do this? This is my fault. She's the woman of Fatua. She's standing up for the truth. And then they will go days without food. She walked. If you look at the hijrah, she walked from Makkah to Mukarramah to Medina to Munawwara, 250 miles. How old is she then? Maybe 8, I don't know. I mean, she passed away. How old was she passed away? 18. And this was 10 years, so it's 8, 9. She walks and enters the Medina with her feet bleeding. This is the upbringing. So like, but then obviously when you say that to people, they can think you've gone crazy. It goes against my instincts as a mother. Okay, fine, it goes against your instincts as a mother. Our instincts are Muhammadan instincts, inshallah. And, you know, we look for the Muhammadan example. But this is what I mean. So therefore, when we're coming into parenting classes, we have to first of all understand what is it that we want, and also what have we actually implemented already. Like one of them, he said about money. You know, he said that should we desire, one of them, he asked a question to one of them, he said, should we desire money or not? Because it's good to have money, isn't it? If you have money, you can give out in charity. So the teacher said, he said, look at your current relationship with money. Right now, you have money. Are you using that money for sadaqah? Are you using that money for khayr? If you're not, then don't desire more of it, because it'll just destroy you. If you are, then desire more of it. And same thing with this. If we are implementing and raising our kids right now in the best way that we can, then desire. Otherwise, yeah, it'll be a hujjah against us. This is the final question. What if you fall short in himma and ability, e.g. health, etc.? We still want best for our kids. What should we aspire to realistically? I mean, that's it's an excellent question, actually, because this is the essence of what we're saying here, is that you have to decide that. Yeah, we have to decide ourselves, what do we want for our children. And that's a personal thing. Like if I'm going to speak personally, yeah, I want my children to be Habib Umar. I want them to be Habab and Nur. I don't want to settle for anything less than that. But you can't then say everyone should want that. Like I remember Sheikh Ibrahim, a teacher, he said something profound once. He said, for me, yeah, he's talking about, he goes, for me to live a life that's even slightly compromising or slightly different to the way of my teachers is unacceptable for me. It's unacceptable. And for us, obviously not. We've got to recognize where we are. Yeah, we can't get by with 2 hours of sleep. We can't be out there all the time, constantly engaged in calling people to Islam. Yeah, we can't read the whole Quran in a week or in 3 days. Yeah, we can't do these things. So therefore, then that's our level, you know, whatever it is. So we have to then recognize that this is my level, and then I have to go with that. And it's the same with raising our children. What is our level of himma? How much do we want? Are we happy for them to just have a good upbringing, etc., etc.? I mean, personally, for me, that's just tragic. If somebody just wants that for their children, it's, you know, it's really, really sad, you know, that you've brought these beings into the world who have the potential to achieve heights, and you just want them to have like a good education and be like a good, you know, good Muslim, and, you know, understand that Islam and, you know, stuff like that. It's like, why, you know, why have children? But if that's where people are, that's where people are. If that's the situation you're in, that's the situation you're in. Yeah, and you hope for ijtiqab, and then you accept that, and then you make your objectives accordingly. That's the point here. Is whatever you want, you then set your objectives like that, and then you work towards achieving that first and foremost. And then when you need assistance in that regard, that's when we can come in with parenting classes and assisting in these kind of things, inshallah. Okay, we'll stop there, inshallah.